Welcome back to another episode of All Film. This week we are going to be discussing
Da-da, 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 da. I love you, baby.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that, man. We are going to be discussing the 1975 movie Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, composed by John Williams, and starring Roy Schneider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw. The movie had a budget of $9 million and a worldwide box office in 1975 of $472 million, which is insane.
That's a profit and a half right there.
I know. You got paid for that one, didn't you? I wonder how much the shark got. Jaws is known as the original summer blockbuster. It kind of perceived a new cultural phenomenon where it was a fast-paced, exciting entertainment piece, which left people wanting more after the movie, and it meant that people were going back for second watches, and it was providing a discussion point afterwards from the film as well. And it's actually the movie that founded the blockbuster film genre as well. So lots of accolades to go with the movie. Alongside that, it got nominated for 4 Oscars, those being Best Picture, Best Sound Mixing, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Score. It did win 3 out of the 4 and lost out to Best Film, which was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So, early film feelings. Tom, what's your thoughts on the movie?
Well, I remember seeing this. I was very young when I saw this, and it basically made me terrified of open water.
Everything.
And I've seen this film. Well, I haven't watched it for a couple of years, and having just watched it again recently. I mean, obviously it's been talked about. Everyone loves this film. What a film! And what I love about it is everyone's different takes on it, like their kind of own like interaction and what they kind of felt about the film. Me personally, it's just a roller coaster ride, isn't it? There's always this sense of dread, and I think it's like if you're scared if you've got a bit of a phobia for open water or sharks, which I know is ridiculous because more people die from a fridge falling on them a year than getting eaten by a shark, but I think it adds a bit more terror to watching it. Obviously, well combined with the score. And what's interesting about it that you're saying about the blockbuster element. I mean, this was the creation of the summer blockbuster. Because originally all films or blockbusters came out around Christmas time. And I think this film got delayed or for whatever reason. No, I think Spielberg wanted it to come out around the time when people were going to the beach.
I think that was a really clever marketing tactic as well. That's genius on it. But kind of like how you see, whenever there's a new Halloween movie come out, it always comes out to Halloween, obviously. But it kind of plays into that atmosphere as well of people going to the beach. It's a really clever way to do it.
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, there's a lot of I'm having some microphone problems here. There are a lot of things and repercussions from the film which have happened. Obviously, there's a lot. Shortly after, there was a massive worldwide increase of fear of going out into the ocean of sharks themselves, and I think what was it? They've said that it was the film was a catalyst, for shark hunting and forcing it more further into its category of an endangered species, which is obviously a bit of a shame. But it's understandable when you see how they kind of paint the picture of the great white in this. Hey,
sorry, it's a bit of a shame. 10 million sharks killed a year. It's a bit of a shame, that.
A bit of a shame. You don't see people like going around hunting fridges, do you?
No. Sorry, I cut you off there. Sorry, you go ahead.
It was needed. No, but anyway, I think I don't know where I was going with that basically, but yeah. So off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I just watching it again, it always gives me the shivers, basically. And just the score alone in itself is a character. And there's, I think, having watched this quite a few times and read a lot of stuff about it, and heard a lot of stuff about it as well, it's so interesting watching it as a kind of like a piece of cinema, like setting itself as a piece of cinematic history, and
Yeah.
all the problems they had with filming of it, and yeah, and its accolades. It's just a very interesting piece of cinematic history, basically.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, going off what you've said, it's same feelings, really. I mean, I personally have got quite a love-hate relationship with this movie. If you just break it down to being a movie piece, for starters, when you think of Jaws, I think it's one of the only movies where you first initially, from the one, obviously the theme song, but two, you recognize the theatrical poster that's always released, and it's become kind of a pop culture icon as well, as seeing that poster of just the shark going upwards with the girl swimming on top of the water as well. So, I mean, looking at the movie itself, I think its use of suspense, thriller, and horror is unprecedented in a lot of ways, and like it holds the test of time as well. When you compare it to the movies that we get now as well, it still holds very strong. Same reason again, though, I do hate this movie for its portrayal of sharks and how ignorant it is. And I think even the author said if he really understood shark behavior, he would never have been able to write the book as well, because it is a leaps in logic. It is playing on phobias. And I think Spielberg, it wasn't his intention to make out sharks to be the villains at all, really. He was just trying to make a movie. But yeah, from the point of view of like, it made generations of people terrified of the water. Even now, I mean, like, I love swimming, and even now you still go in the water and you think, I just don't think about that film. Just don't think about it as well. But again, and we'll probably come on to this, but Spielberg was really clever in his use of the camera to put you in that position as well and make you feel you're a part of it. And it's something that you do get that follows you as well when you have your own experiences going to the beach. And like, it just, he had this brilliant idea of how to make the movie play on you afterwards as well. So yeah, I think the movie is a fantastic bit of history, and I think it's something that I think every monster movie since, or horror movies, has tried following in the way it uses suspense and thriller. The score itself, I think, really levitates the movie and brings it up, though, because I think we did talk about this when we done Jurassic Park as well, that the scenes are just personified when you bring that score in, and that's exactly what happens with this movie.
Yeah, and basically when John Williams showed Spielberg the idea for the score on his piano, playing the two notes E and F over and over and over and over again, Spielberg thought he was joking, and he said, "Come on, show me the actual idea." But John Williams said that he tried to get Spielberg to picture and imagine a vast array of contrabasses playing those two notes over and over again. Now, contrabass is an orchestral instrument which is lower in pitch than a usual bass. So John Williams wanted to get this kind of like thundering, repeated sound, which he wanted to represent the sound and the depths of the ocean. And he said basically that he wanted it to, have it slow and quiet and faint when the shark is at a distance, or when the danger is like far away, and gradually as the danger gets closer and the shark gets closer, it gets louder and it gets faster. And it's a very interesting thing, because a lot have compared, and even Williams has talked about this, about if you think about the score for Psycho.
I was literally just going to mention that.
Yeah. And how, there's a lot of obvious comparisons, but Williams said that, Psycho is one note, which is very high, Jaws is 2 notes, which are very low. And I think that's his way of defending it, really.
Yeah. The thing is, and that's one thing I was going to touch on as well, is of all the times I've watched this movie, it wasn't until this time that I realized and seen the comparisons between this and what you would get with the Hitchcock film as well. Because it is, like you said, it is a much deeper tone that pitch that he plays in, whereas what you get, and in my thing, like Psycho is much higher pitched, and the same with like Halloween is a much higher screech as well that they use. So it kind of is in contrast with what he done with that. And it's, again, there were so many production issues and shooting issues they had with the shark and things. This movie is just full of happy accidents. And in a way, because I know that famously the shark kept malfunctioning, it kept sinking in the water. So when Spielberg had this idea of, let's just shoot this in the water so you see it from more like the shark's point of view, I don't think he realized what sort of suspense that was actually going to create, and how much it brought to the movie itself. Because, like we said, the poster is of a shark. We know what it is because we don't initially see it. And for the first, 2/3 of the movie, I would say, we don't have a full view of it. It makes the audience think about what's lurking behind it. It's not directly on screen. It's always just off center or off screen, and you see everything through the point of view of the shark in the water. It's kind of like very suggestive approach to what Hitchcock would do as well. So it's only this time I've ever really seen the parallels to what Hitchcock would do with his movies, like Psycho and The Birds as well. Because interestingly enough, the opening, when the Universal screen comes on, are you aware of this fact as well? With he uses like a squeal for the birds as well, which is the same what Hitchcock uses in Birds.
Yeah, the same borrowed kind of like
it's the same sound, just to mimic what he uses in the Birds as well.
Like a Wilhelm scream, basically.
That sort of thing,
like a hidden, that's amazing.
Yeah,
so I know that intro is you straight away, the start of it is the point of view, isn't it? It's a point of view camera where it's the depths of the ocean floor, and it's ominous from the start, isn't it, really?
I think it's such an interesting choice to just say, sorry, let's just go straight in with the score instantly. And you don't see anything. You don't see what's going on, but it just invites you to feel uneasy in the scene. Again, talking about happy accents with it as well, I find it interesting because this is the only second collaboration that John Williams and Spielberg had. So knowing what we know now with them, and again, when we talked about how iconic Jurassic Park is, this was their second collaboration. We haven't got to Indiana Jones movies yet. We haven't got to Jurassic Park, and E.T. as well, didn't he do E.T.?
Yeah,
I think he did. Yeah, so
he did E.T. as well.
Yeah, so it's just interesting to see how this started, and arguably it is actually the most iconic as well. How they just both, in some ways, share this vision of what they want to see on screen and how they want to present it, and it just works every single time.
Well, there were moments as well where, when you're watching it, and I think it's more of an apparent theme in the film when towards the end, when you've got Brody, Hooper, and Quint against the shark in the boat, and there's parts where the music just becomes very heroic, and uplifting, and it kind of reminded me of some of Williams' work on, obviously, Indiana Jones, but some of his work on even Harry Potter. I was watching it, and I was like, this is so, and it's so much more than 2 notes, this score. I mean, it's very obviously people just think it's Jaws. Da, da, da. I even made a terrible joke at the start of this. But, I think it's just, it does take you on that kind of journey. And I think obviously the 2 notes, the iconic piece, is to resemble dread and fear. And these parts where he includes these heroic kind of uplifting motifs are really more to give you a sense of that everything's going to be okay, positivity and optimism, that they're actually going to defeat this shark, you know, and I think it's so well done. But I think that's what from watching it recently, that's what really caught me off guard. The amount of uplifting and how kind of, you know, heroic-esque kind of music there is in this.
Well, that is interesting you say that, because for me, that's the one part that took me out to the movie. And it's the same thing. Like, I didn't expect to have that, you know, throughout the movie, we've had the theme that's building the tension. It's very minimalist. It's minimalist when he used to the shark as well. We don't see it, but, you know, throughout the movie then towards the third act, we don't need to have that theme constantly over again. We've seen the shark and we've seen it come out of the water. We know what it looks like. So there's no need to have that thrill of suspense. So when they do have that kind of heroic thing, and it's the scene where the shark is moving through the water, and I think is when he's got the yellow canisters and they dragging him and the boat is chasing him.
Yeah.
It took me out of it personally. It didn't fit the style, and this is my only criticism of the movie really. It didn't fit the tone and the theme they were going for. Now if they use that at the very end of the movie when you know they're safe, because like what you said there, it's showing that everything's going to be okay, but then it just drops back into using that menacing theme. And even, like, you know, when we do talk about some of the deaths as well with Quint, they don't even use any sound at all, which even somehow makes it even more horrible then, that they've gone from using the most suspenseful, thrilling theme of all time to the happiest song that you would hear in Harry Potter, and then Quint's death, there's no sound. And for some reason, it just makes it feel so much worse and much more real as well.
Oh, Quint's death. It's one of the worst deaths I think I've ever seen on film. It's just... And I think really that's also you know, a lot of people have talked about this as well. And it's a very easy thing to say, but a smart decision to not include any sound. And maybe, obviously, I thoroughly enjoyed the kind of juxtaposition between the happy and the heroic to them, the dread or the silence.
Yeah.
But I could see why that would take you out of the movie a bit. But I think it makes it much more poignant when there is the silence and it's just Quint just screaming.
It's awful, isn't it?
Oh,
it's
God.
awful. But then they make it even worse because you see the part where the jaws literally just crunch a little bit hard and the blood shoots out of his mouth. And you're like, you're just making this so much worse for the bloke. Like, leave him alone. But there is sorry, just quickly, there is a part, and I do want to go back to the beginning of the movie as well, but just quickly, what makes that scene worse with Quint for me is that when he does go back in the water, there's that eerie silence. You just hear like the sound effects of like the creaking on the boat and that. And Brody is on his own. And for whatever reason, it makes it so much worse because he's got no way out of this. And you just see that boat slowly sinking as well. And it's just, it's gut-wrenching as well. It just makes you feel so uneasy for him.
Yeah, and at that point, you just think Hooper's buggered, don't you? You know, you see him come, you know, he's been in the cage and he swims down. I think he hides into a rock and he just watches.
Pussy. He's like, nah, I'm up to this.
Yeah, oh God, what a wimp not fighting the shark face on.
Oh, you scared
Come on, you big nose bugger. No, but I think that's, yeah, for me, just it's just the silent, the lack of music and the loud screams. It's just it's just an awful day. And I think what's poignant about it is we go back to his introduction into the film where they're all having that kind of like community meeting about the beaches and if they're going to close it, and they're all yabbering on and say it's only going to be closed for 24 hours. And then you get the introduction to Quint and he's scraping the chalkboard with his nails. I mean, it goes on, but that's a great introduction to his character because he just really doesn't give a crap what anyone thinks about him.
No.
And he carry on. No, Karen.
No, I was going to say, well, it's interesting because it's kind of like the parallels between the start of that meeting as well. You got Brody, who is the chief of police. He's in his sheriff's outfit. He demands to have respect and attention, and nobody's giving it to him. They're all talking amongst themselves. They're ignoring him completely. But then it's interesting that then the guy who scrapes his nails is a fisherman. He looks like smells of guts from, you know, he smells awful. and he just
He does
demands
look like
attention. He reminds me a lot as well in that scene of like what's the one-legged fisherman in The Simpsons? One-Leg Willie, or something like that.
What's his name?
he looks like him, and it's interesting because you got Brody that is supposed to be the respected one, and he gets no attention, but then everyone is just eyes on him, and he somehow gets some respect out of it as well.
Well, I just googled it, and I can't remember the fisherman being ever named, but I could everyone knows who he is, but his name. So he's known as the sea captain, but his actual name is Horatio Peter McAllister.
I don't think we've ever found that out.
Horatio. Oh god. Okay, so back to Jaws.
Sorry, just going back to the start of the movie as well. I always found, for me, and I done a piece of this last year on my film course as well, where we looked at the introduction of the movie, and like we said, you got the point of view shot going through the water. You got the beach party going on as well, and then Chrissy and the other guy go swimming in the sea. This part always freaks me out as well, where you just see her, like the camera looking upwards. You got a long shot of her in the water, and it's almost like the eyes of the shark are just watching, and you're seeing it through the shark's point of view. But I've juxtaposed to how Quint dies, where he is being dragged in this silence. We don't get to see what's going on below the water. We just see it from her point of view, screaming in dread. The camera always stays still on the water as well while she's flailing back and forth. And it was always a really interesting choice for me that, and Spielberg said this as well, he wanted to have the camera resting on the water. So he envisioned you as the audience, like you're floating on the water as well, just to put you in that scene even further. And I think it was a really good choice. It's a horrifying scene to open with the movie, and I can imagine going back in 1975, it would have been, it's terrifying now, so it must have been awful to watch in cinemas then, but what a powerful way to start your movie as well.
Oh yeah, indeed. And an interesting fact about that as well, the actress Susan Backlines, I think her name was, so basically the crew members had a leg pulled to represent her kind of like tossing and turning basically. And Spielberg actually, part of it, but Spielberg said that she wasn't to know when they were going to pull her. So the instant jerk reaction would be a bit more kind of realistic, basically. A bit cruel.
I would want to be paid out. I wanted to be paid double for that. You can fuck right off. Like, Spielberg, don't touch my legs.
But yeah, no, it's a really interesting thing, and it goes to that thing where it's about a shark. I mean, the whole concept, which has been talked about for years, is that Jaws is a film not about a shark. It's about kind of like humans and how we deal with each other in kind of like certain situations. But
yeah,
I think makes it much more poignant that we don't see the shark until I think about 1 hour 24 minutes into it or something. I think.
Yeah.
Or 1 hour 21. Yeah.
It's that was the interesting thing, and again, it's something on this watch. It's the scene where everyone's on the beach, and just to go back to what you said as well, it's how humans deal with things. And you can remember being younger watching this, and you think, there's no way they'd leave the beaches be open. That's not a chance. But when we look at like how, people have responded in the events that we're all living in today, you can imagine quite easily people go, nah, if I could keep the beaches open, don't worry about it. We need the money for tourism and that.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah. Swim out to help out.
Yeah. 10% off. You're the first limb you lose. So I did have a fact for you as well, which was quite interesting, and I'm just going to try and pull it up for you here. But do you know Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt?
Yeah. Known for great white sharks, isn't it?
Yeah. So going back, I think it was in the 2000s, I can't find the actual thing, but basically they had an incident with a shark very similar as well. And the way they decided to handle it was they used this movie as a point of reference. So they kept the beaches open and just had people going in the sea and pretended like nothing was happening, even to the point that they caught another shark and said that was the shark.
No.
Yeah.
And did they get a local? Did they explain it to a local? And they go, "It's a tiger shark," and the local went, "A what?"
That's so funny. Like, it's funny that bloke done that. It's like, you live on a fishing island and you don't know what a tiger shark is. A what?
A what?
I hope he was paid extra for that. I hope Spielberg said, "Can you just go a little bit more confused on the next take and just drag it?"
Can you put the clueless level to 120%, please?
I was about to say, yeah, I was hoping you'll go, "But that's a shark."
A shark? Oh, but what was I going to say? Yeah, sorry, carry on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that it is an interesting thing. Like the scene where you got the people on the beach and everyone's getting in the water. I think this is such a powerful part of the movie where, again, we get that shot we've seen before of, it mimics what we've seen at the start of the movie, where it's the point of view, you see all the legs moving underwater and you think, oh, it's going to be the same shot again. But then it does, the kid just gets pulled and then we just get this shot going through the water where the shark is twisting around and you just see his fins moving in the water as well. And it's horrifying. And then you get that dolly shot as well, that iconic dolly shot as well, which it's, and again, another thing that's inspired by Hitchcock with the movie Vertigo as well. But it's such a powerful moment for the movie as well, because you get that sense of dread that Brody is going through, and it's a horrifying thing because, again, where we first got started the movie and is one person on her own, there's hundreds of people witnessing this, so it's not like that horror movie where there's a killer hiding and he's just taking one person out by one. It's the visibility of this creature just attacking in front of crowds of people.
It's in plain sight, isn't it?
In plain sight, that's what I was looking for, yeah. So it's basically, it makes it that much more dreadful. And especially when you just see the inflatable with blood around her in the water. It's just, it's awful, isn't it?
I wonder how inflatable sales went after Jaws, because he picked out that kid in the inflatable. So
did he really?
so maybe inflatable, the stocks in all of. I can imagine like a manager of an inflatable company just watching Jaws and thinking, "Oh, this is going to be great for business." But they'll be on the inflatable. He'll be the one who survives. What? And just knowing that his business is going to crumble the next day.
It's kind of like The Outpost as well, when the It movies, the re-releases came out, and like clowns were like, "This is affecting our business," and it genuinely was, because he's like, "This is what clowns are about." And you got this guy with his inflatables going, "He's just put me right out of business here. Everyone's there, their fancy dinghies now and their wooden boats." Oh, we've really got sidetracked on this one, haven't we?
We have. I think just going back to it as well, around that time, you've got that iconic shot about 17 minutes where the camera zooms into Brody's face, but it's that superimposed shot where it kind of like the background stays the same, but it zooms into his face, and it's incredible. It's the look of terror and confusion in his face. And it's just, there's so many iconic shots in this film, isn't there, really?
Yeah, and it's not often you do get that with many movies. You might get the odd one or two, but there's so many iconic shots, there's so many iconic scenes with music and quotes as well that we hear. Like, obviously the most iconic one is "Oh, look, it's Jaws the shark." But
there's Jaws.
Oh, that's Jaws.
Hey, Jawsy baby. I think what you were going to say is
we're going to need a bigger boat.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's a common misconception that it's we're going to need a bigger boat. It's you're going to need a bigger boat. And it's one of the most famously misquoted film lines in the history of cinema, basically.
What's the other one?
I don't know. I was trying to do a version of "I'll be back" then. Like,
there's a Welsh version.
I'll be front.
There's a Welsh version of that, which is "I'll be there now in a minute." No, it's the other one, which everyone mishears as well, is "Luke, I am your father."
Luca.
So Luke, I am your father. No, who's Luke?
It's like, who's Luca?
No, because he
So
doesn't
Luke,
say,
I
Luke,
am
I
your
am your
father.
father. He says, no, I am your father.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, the more you know.
Luca. And Luke's like,
Luke.
who the fuck's Luca?
And Vader's like, oh my God, no,
wrong,
no, you
wrong
fucking tell
son.
me. I got another one. Yeah.
Wrong guy, wrong Jedi.
Just quickly as well, with this shot on the beach as well, for me personally, I think, and I don't know whether you'd agree with me on this, but the location for this was Martha's Vineyard, which is in, I think it's just south of Massachusetts. So it's on the eastern side, where for me, I felt this was a little bit more relatable in the way, or grounded for me, because where usually you get the movies like these and they might be a little bit more in a tropical setting, like think of like The Meg or Deep Blue Sea, or even like movies like King Kong, Godzilla, they're always in a much more far away, distant land. Whereas I don't know whether you get a feeling, because the setting of this movie, it could have been done in Dorset or Bournemouth. And it just makes it feel like, shit, this could be Britain. And it just made it feel that, I don't know whether that's just me, but because it doesn't have the tropical palm trees, it does just have, a very British tone to like how the beach looks and how people are dressed. To be fair, that day they're all on the beach when the kid gets attacked, it's windy as hell and it looks freezing, which very is reminiscent of British weather anyway. So I don't know whether that's just me, but I always really thought this is a little more relatable because it does have a tone of like just being British weather or British scenery.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the actual weather itself, that it was too sunny. But yeah, it's I kind of know what you mean, because I didn't think about it like that, but because you're so lulled into the captivating like kind of cinematography of it all, I guess it's a very, you're not taken back by this is another place because of the palm trees swaying and stuff like that.
Yeah. You've got to wait for Jaws 4: The Revenge to see that. Have you seen that one, by the way? We won't talk about it now. We'll do that.
I think I saw about 10 minutes of it and I just gave up.
Awful.
So if you are watching us on YouTube, you might have wondered why we're in different attire and Joel is suddenly in a hotel room. It's because we got cut short last time. So we're going to continue Jaws where we left off. And so what I want to talk about is how this was all filmed and how many problems they had with it, because I think it's right by saying that the original shoot was supposed to be 65 days and it overran to 159 days in total. And as everyone knows, it's mainly down to the complications they had, one with the shark itself, and two, the fact that Spielberg wanted to film out at sea. He was offered even a lot of money and to say that it would be covered to film it and we could recreate kind of like an ocean scene at the studio, but he said he really wanted it to make it feel like they were completely out in the ocean and the shark was real. Now the shark itself was nicknamed Bruce, which was named after Steven Spielberg's lawyer. And this lawyer also represents stars like Demi Moore, Ben Stiller, Clint Eastwood. So he's quite a well-known lawyer in the kind of like in the circles of Hollywood, basically. And I think what's quite interesting about it is the cause of its success is down to the cause of issues they had on filming it and the issues with the shark itself, really.
Yeah. I mean, another interesting fact is that while they did nickname it Bruce, it did have another nickname as well, and it was the Great White Turd. Do you know that one? Just because of the problems they had with the animatronics. It's interesting as well because we know the issues they had where they kept, for the scenes where they had to shoot it in a pool as well, it was sinking to the bottom all the time. But it's
originally when they went to the special effects guys and the production company and Spielberg went to kind of meet the shark and how it was going to look. This before they did any filming. it apparently came up tail first, didn't it?
Did it really?
It came up tail first, and then it started sinking. And then Spielberg said, how long is it going to take to fix this shark? And they said at the time, it'll be fine. It'll be ready by tomorrow. And then I think it took, then he got the update that it would take, I think, a couple of months for the shark to start working properly. Properly, sorry. And because of that, Spielberg then had to basically rewrite a lot of the scenes, and he replanned how they would shoot this, and then creating that, what led to this kind of like first the camera angles, the camera shots, we get where it's from the shark's perspective. And he also said that the scenes where the shark is dragging, when he drags the two fishermen, or the shark hunters, I guess, off the pier, and he brings the pier into the water and it snaps off. He was talking about how if he showed the shark at that point, or if he showed the shark at the start of a film, the cinematic, the kind of audience reaction would not have nearly been as terrified as they had originally.
It wouldn't. And again, it is a really happy mistake, and it's kind of like a blessing in disguise that they were having all these faults. And it's kind of like it was a sign for them to not go down that route of showing the shark at all times. And it's kind of like what we discussed before. Having that level of suspense lingering, of not seeing it, what it is, but you don't see it, and for so much of the movie. And when you do see it, then it's not just presented on the screen straight away. The first shot I think we get is when he takes the kid Alex on the inflatable in the water, and you just see the movement of the fins in the water, with the fisherman then in the with Brody's son speaking to him, and he falls in the water. It's so cleverly done, because you just see the blurry outline of the shark's mouth open underwater. It's that building the suspense, it kind of in the way that Hitchcock does it as well, where he doesn't show it on screen, it's just lingering in the background, or in this case lingering under the water. But it really does paint the picture of how losing the effect of the animatronics, or how frustrating it was for them, made this movie so much better as well. And he done a fantastic job in taking the best of a bad situation and turning into something special.
And that's a thing about Spielberg himself, proving himself to the Hollywood elite, that he could do a lot and get creative when challenges are faced in front of him. And I think, certain things like from the inside. So, for example, when we initially see the shark, just way past the hour mark, and Brody is like throwing chum into the water. That's where we get the initial introduction to actually seeing the shark, or Jaws, or Bruce, or the great white turd, as they were calling it. And that's where it leads into the famous quote, "You're going to need a bigger boat." And that was improvised by Roy Schneider, the actor who plays Martin Brody. And it was going back to the production and kind of how it was all shot. It was actually an inside joke, because there was basically a support boat for the filming of it, because Spielberg wanted them to film out at sea. And apparently it was like this tiny boat. It was too small for production. They would have midges flying from the mainland all out just to eat them alive, basically. And it was an ongoing thing, which the cast and crew, basically always said that they're going to need a bigger boat. And that was really initially talking about the production boat. And it's now one of the most famous. I think it's the most famous line in the film itself, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's been adapted and parodied a lot in the future movies as well. The one issue I think for me, which I had, and again, like every scene with the shark, considering this is 1975, I know I mentioned this when we talked about Jurassic Park. The graphics for me generally do stand out as well. I personally don't have an issue with how the shark looks as such. there is some brief moments, in particular, you're going to need a bigger boat moment where the shark comes out the water. One, it's such a good shot because it's probably one of the only sort of jump scares we have in the movie. But what makes that work is that they avoided any use of John Williams' score. So it's just silent, really. It's just a shark coming out the water, and it makes it terrifying. However, if you really watch, you can see the animatronics, and it looks exactly how it does when it was at Universal Studios as well.
Yeah.
The other part then is when Quint, when he goes on the back of the boat and attacks Quint, you can see the clear motion of just the animatronics coming in like that. It's the only two parts of the movie which, again, the shark doesn't hold well on the screen, but other than that, I think they've done a fantastic job, and it still stays terrifying to this day as well.
Oh yeah, and the interesting thing about that as well, I don't know if you remember, but it's joked about in Back to the Future 2, where Michael J. Fox, Marty McFly, sees like kind of like a cinema animation for Jaws 19.
Oh yeah.
Jumps out and kind of eats him, and he says, "Still doesn't look real." And I really think, honestly, that it would be if to this day, if they made it different, there wouldn't be that kind of like long introduction, until we see the shark, and it kind of like builds and builds. What's quite interesting about that as well, when they weren't filming the scenes, one of the sharks in Australia got tangled up and started to thrash around, basically, which is obviously
terrifying. Yeah,
terrifying, and obviously it's not nice for the shark, obviously, but the shark was okay in the end. But it started to thrash around just to basically try and get away from the cage, and they actually kept that footage in the film. If you see, if you look back at the film, it's shortly after like Hooper kind of like swims away and hides into a rock. It's where Jaws is thrashing around. That's that's actual. That's an actual shark, but it wasn't planned, basically. So yeah, and one thing Steven Spielberg said about the casting of that role, when he hired like the actor of short stature, is basically that they had a day of casting, and this guy came in and he was actually like covered in blood and he was all torn up. And apparently, actually Spielberg said that this actor had just been in a car crash, and he was so worried about missing the casting shoot for it, that he basically just went straight to Universal Studios.
Oh, wow.
And Steven Spielberg said that, if someone can do that and show this much commitment to the film, they're going to be fine, diving with great white sharks in Australia. Wow. So yeah, it's quite an interesting little fact, which eventually, made it to a film as well.
Can you imagine if you went, I don't think you're right for the part, sorry.
Arm hanging off.
Oh, yeah, just like, okay, yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, sorry.
His wife just calls him, can you pick me up? About that.
Yeah. Well, at least you got the part.
About that. Let's cancel our date to SeaWorld, please.
But no, there's another part as well, because I can remember watching it with Hooper, and he's in the cage as well. That's a really good scene, because I know they use one shot which looks like it's from a documentary, and it almost doesn't fit the scene in some ways, because you see the shark going around Hooper in the cage, and then there's just a clear shot to something that's from a documentary. But that entire scene is really well done. Again, when Hooper's in the cage, you can see that outline of the shark coming in the distance, and he just goes past the cage there, and he's got a much more realistic feel to it. And it must have been really difficult to shoot those scenes as well. I know, like, it is for a movie and that, but it must just take, because you've got to kind of play the part with a sense of fear as well.
Yeah.
Because, it's supposed to be a suspenseful scene. So it must be horrible trying to do that, because it's quite scary when you're in the water, if it's real or if it's fake. It must be horrible trying to do those scenes.
It's and Hooper's character is fantastic as well. I mean, we'll talk about the kind of the kind of differences between the book and the film, but with that, like, Hooper wasn't supposed to be like he is in the film, And
not as charismatic and charming.
Well, yeah, and I think Spielberg's I wanted to make Dreyfuss's character like himself, basically. So he saw himself in this character, and there's like little things about him which are quite likable. For example, his introduction, I think it's about 29 minutes in, and he's been called in by Brody, and at this point Brody doesn't know who he is. And he doesn't know that he's this oceanographer. And I remember the bit which is really funny where he's telling all these other fishermen, because it's when it's announced that they're going to hunt the shark down and kill the shark. And he's warning all these kind of like fishermen to not go and do it because the shark could kill them. And they're like, oh, yeah, just they're taking the mick. They're not taking him seriously. And there's one bit where he just turns around and just goes, they're all going to die. And I just love that little throwaway bit.
Yeah, he is really good. And again, it's very different because in the book, he wasn't as... I don't think any of the characters were supposed to be this charismatic and friendly in the books. In particular, Chief Brody was supposed to be a bit of a more selfish person in the book as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it does... Basically, the book is a big change because while the movie is centered around the shark, in Peter Benchley's novel, the story isn't necessarily about the shark. It's a framing device for the story, really. It's more about how the the town that they're in, Amity, is trying to stay afloat financially because of the issues the shark has caused into the town. So it's not necessarily a part of the problem. It sounds boring, to be fair. It's just politics, if anything. When the producers optioned the film rights for the novel, they offered Peter Benchley $175,000. So he kept the screenplay as close to the novel as possible, but Spielberg rejected it, and he also rejected 2 further drafts that he'd done just because it wasn't right for the story. And again, I think if they didn't make the shark the integral part of the story as it is in this, if they didn't make the shark the main part of the story and they focused on the side of the town, it wouldn't have been half as interesting for us. So that's one of the main things. The other subplot which I found really interesting in the book as well is the mayor, who wants to keep the beaches open. He gets entangled with the mafia, which is such an interesting subpoint as well. The mob even goes so far to murder Brody's cat. Truthfully, this whole subplot...
Really?
Yeah.
In the
subplot, yeah. This whole subplot seems excessive for a story which already has a deadly killer. But again...
excessive.
Yeah. But again, it's
surprised they didn't rename it Claws. Terrible. I mean, It could also be a pause. Claws would be more of like a festive shark tale, wouldn't it?
It would actually. Another one as well with the changes they made is that after Hooper assumes he's dead, he actually dies quite graphically and gruesomely, which is seen as repercussion because he also in the book has an affair with Brody's wife. So they don't really go into much of that in the movie. There's like a passing comment that they make where she says to him, are you in sharks? And she's trying to say, are you interested in sharks or whatever? But and the other thing as well is that the shark just dies in the book. There's not, it just goes away. So it doesn't necessarily... So
there's not the big famous scene of the gas canister getting blown up.
Son of a bitch. Yeah, it's none of that. Yeah.
That's the Hollywood kind of take on it, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so exactly.
It's funny actually talking about Brody's wife, because Brody's wife in the film, I remember like their children are playing out just after the beaches have been closed. And obviously Brody is terrified and and has seen the body. And his wife is just like, yeah, they're just out in the boat. Everything's fine. Oh, they're not in the water. Don't worry about it. And then Brody obviously like is shocked and he's like trying to get them off the boat. And she's like, no, it's fine. And then she literally looks at like a comic or a book and she just sees a picture of a shark eating a boat or biting a boat. She just suddenly goes, come inside, like
Yeah.
it's like an instant reaction kind of thing. But
I quite like that as well, because again, it's quite realistic in the way that if you just got one bloke going around the town saying this is a shark when they've never had these issues before, it kind of plays into human ignorance as well.
yeah,
So I think that's a really interesting part that they did put in the story, and is, again, like I know we touched on this earlier on, but the fact that people were still going to the beach, going in the water, the mayor not closing anything, is just an interesting part of the story, which I'm glad they kept in there.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's like it's a really interesting thing, and it touches upon that. Obviously, we don't get the introduction of Mayor Vaughan's backstory and the mafia, but you can tell like he really wants to keep those beaches open. Funnily enough, going back to the book, did you know that Peter Benchley is the author, has a cameo in the film?
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he's the news
A
reporter. A
what?
what? No, he's not the tiger shark guy. He's the news reporter on the beach with the thick rimmed glasses. So that's his cameo.
Oh,
And
okay.
also another interesting cameo. Steven Spielberg is the voice of the Amity Island dispatcher who calls Quint's
Yes.
boat and tries to pass on a message from Brody's wife.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, going on to Quint, I mean, let's talk about like Robert Shaw, him as an actor, and kind of the not only was there problems with it overrunning, there was problems with filming out at sea, there was problems with the shark. But there were also problems with Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw as actors working together.
Yeah.
Shaw basically, sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, because they obviously had a very difficult relationship on set, and I think if anything, that added really well to the tension that they have in scenes. And if anything, like they clearly have a dislike for each other in the movie, but it's definitely something that, if anything, Spielberg probably wanted to encourage, because it adds to that tension and the chemistry that they have. But then it makes it even more endearing when you do have that scene on the Orca, when the three of them are just drinking together, sharing war stories and things. It just makes it that much more endearing.
I think as well, once I don't know about you, but for me, after knowing that they didn't really get along so well on set, seeing that scene and they're like singing together, drinking together, I know it was just acting, but it was quite heartwarming for me to see that, especially knowing that they had on set had troubles as well.
Definitely.
I think famously Richard Dreyfuss has talked about Robert Shaw on set and said, one to one, he's like the nicest person you'll ever meet. And then as soon as there's other people around and there's, the cast and they're filming and the production team, he turns into someone else, like Jekyll and Hyde, basically. And Robert Shaw like kind of taunted Dreyfuss. He asked, he made a bet to him and said, I bet you can't climb this mast of a boat and jump off. He the kind of like line when looking at his hands and says, "You've got city hands,"
He must have just angered him, and you could see that with Hooper in the scenes as well. It's just there's a genuine frustration there, because one of the problems that he did have, they did have, is Robert Shaw's drinking, and it played well into the scene where they are drinking on the boat, because initially they had to do the take and he was too drunk for the scene as well. So he said to Spielberg, "Can we, I redo it tomorrow?" And they ended up doing it in one take as well. One other issue they had with him, that he was evading the I think it was at the tax office as well or something.
Oh, really?
He was done for tax evasion, so they had to flying him back to Canada as well, just from scenes, just because he couldn't stay in the States, otherwise he'd be arrested as well. So yeah, I think he was worth the trouble.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, he's perfect in the role. And it's, I mean, going from that as well, Richard Dreyfuss afterwards has talked about how he, did have a good relationship with Robert Shaw afterwards. They were supposed to work together more, and he even said that it was an honor to work with him and see him, you know, in his profession and like learning from him, because obviously, you know, Richard Dreyfuss at the time was a bit younger than Robert Shaw. And another interesting thing, Robert Shaw's son has a play which they've performed. I know they've performed at the Edinburgh Festival at least, and I think it's about Jaws and about how, you know, the trouble they had with the filming of it, and it's kind of like a parody kind of play take on it all, basically.
Right.
But it's a really like interesting thing, and I think Shaw's character, Quint, is a really interesting one. You know, there's a really poignant moment as well where he talks about, I don't know if you remember, where he talks about when they were delivering the atomic bomb, and he talks about like seeing all his friends and you know, being picked off by great white sharks, and that was how,
that's
like,
horrifying.
Yeah, but it's a great scene how he describes that. And I remember afterwards he says something along the lines of like, I'll never wear like a life jacket again. And there's a scene, like, I think it's about 10 minutes later, when the shark is really kind of making damage to the orca, the boat, and he grabs a few life jackets and throws them to Brody and Hooper, but he doesn't have one himself. And I
never noticed that.
Yeah, I always thought that, you know, and it was, you know, 10 or 15 minutes after he had that. So it's just noticing little things like that. And that's attention to detail, I think, by Spielberg, which is just great to see.
Yeah.
Going on to like one of the, obviously going back to Brody, Roy Schneider, basically. Did you know that he got the role he was at a Hollywood party and he overheard Spielberg talking to a friend and about Jaws itself. And
really?
He actually just asked him if he could be in the film. And Spielberg had seen him in one of his recent films, which was The French Connection, which Roy Schneider had starred in, and he was a fan of it. So, and that's how, you know, he got kind of casted and brought into it, because it was just,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you got that where he's just at a party having a couple of drinks, just waddles up to Spielberg and goes, "Oh, can I be in your movie?" And you've got some guy who crashed his car, shows up on set and gets covered in blood, and he goes, "You're not really prepared for this scene, are you? I don't think you're even trying, pal." So
he definitely got the hard way of getting into the film, but
yeah,
I'm paid a lot less.
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah,
but he got the gig in the end, though.
He was great casting again, and it's for me, Brody did all right. He's the hero of the story, but he doesn't necessarily have that suave hero sort of charisma that we normally see in these sort of movies.
He's the antithesis of the kind of like American dream. He's successful, he's got a family, he's a good guy, he's likable. He's not like, you know, super ripped, or he's not like a superhero kind of thing, but that's kind of thing where you really cheer for him, and when he does kill the shark at the end, you really are happy for him, because there's been so much built up, and at that point we don't even know if Hooper's still alive, do we?
No, that's right. Yeah, and I think that's it's one of those things. You're so engrossed in the movie at the end as well, you forget about Hooper. So while he's just hiding behind the rock or whatever he's doing, the pussy. But I think he's great. He's probably my favorite character in the story. But one thing I would say, you know, just with the ending as well, I mean, this is a 2-hour-long movie. It goes by so fast in itself. And the ending is literally kill the shark, done, movie over. You just get that shot of them coming into the beach on the raft, and that's it. We don't see anything else. We don't need anything else. And it's really interesting because obviously we had 3 sequels from this, which I think Spielberg does not associate with at all. I think
he wasn't part of it. Yeah,
which is the right decision. Again, it's an example of where you should have done the first movie, leave it at that. I mean, I love the Hannibal series, but Silence of the Lambs, leave it at that and just walk away from it.
Kind of like him with Lucas. They should have done the first 3 Indiana Jones films and left it at that.
See, I'll disagree with you on that. I've got a secret love for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's shameful.
I haven't seen it in about 10 years or so.
Well, I'm saying were you drunk? Were you blind? Were you on drugs when you saw it?
But my issue with it is because it gets a lot of criticism, and don't get me wrong, rightfully so, it does. But this could be an entire episode in itself. However, was it any more? All right, people criticize the fact it was aliens. Is that any more ridiculous than trying to find the cup that Jesus drank out of?
It's not about how ridiculous the idea is. It's about how it's done, really, I guess.
But what? All right. So what's wrong then? What is really wrong with Shia LaBeouf swinging like Tarzan through a CGI jungle with monkeys following him? What's the big deal? I'm being sarcastic, by the way. It's an awful movie.
If that's wrong, I don't want to be right. For us, you actually had me there. I thought you actually when you started saying that monkey stuff at the end, I was like,
no. There's some parts of it I can remember enjoying, but it is a colossal piece of shit. And it's interesting to see how, because they are.
I'm surprised they didn't put that on the poster. Joel Herbert. A colossal piece of shit.
Yeah. But it'd be interesting how they do Indiana Jones 5. But anyway, back to the Indiana Jones. Obviously you had the subsequent movies that followed it. But what I really like with this, and there's always a part of me feels like this, and maybe this is just down to my own fears of being in the water. They've killed the Great White Turd. They're both coming in on the raft or whatever they've got, coming in back into the beach. And you just know that if it was made now, there would be a part where you could just see a fin come up in the back, and it turns out there's another shark as well.
Well, what I wanted to say, and this is one thing which I've noticed from it, that it's a great ending, and I really think it's a great ending. But I do think if you were those two guys swimming off, and they're quite far from shore,
so far,
and let's not forget that not very long before they found another. Well, it was a tiger shark, but it was a big shark,
A what?
I set it up and you hit it out the park. But
I love that line.
Oh, so good. But by the way, whoever's listening to this and they don't know what we're talking about, just watch the film again and you'll know it.
The tiger shark scene.
The tiger shark scene. But what was I going to say? But I'm thinking like they're swimming off and they're quite far away from shore, and they've just killed obviously a 20 or 25 foot great white shark. Surely, and also now there's blood everywhere.
Yeah,
wouldn't you be thinking
as well?
Especially that they've just gone through that very traumatic experience. Brody lives there and he's in charge of the beach. Hooper is an oceanographer. Wouldn't you be thinking, we might be buggered here. Let's obviously get back as quickly as possible. But they're like, oh, what day is it? Oh, I used to be afraid of the ocean. Can't understand why. you would be like, let's get back as soon as possible.
Yeah, just haul ass here. The thing is, I agree with you completely. And again, you assume they're gonna bring this thing up where there could be a shark at the end. I'm glad they didn't go down that.
I mean, like I said, I think it's like a little thing which I think it's a funny point to make, but it would ruin it if you just saw a fin.
However, scientifically speaking, I could be wrong here, but they would be drawn to the blood, not the people, because there's a colossal amount of blood which is from Quint and the shark, which is, if you remember, sinking down. So that's where they're going to be attracted to, not them pair swimming away.
That's true, but what if the shark was en route and was like, oh, where's that blood? Oh, what's this? You got two fresh meals right here. I'll have these and I'll have that for dessert.
It's just we got David Attenborough on the show next week, so we could ask him. No, I agree. But just do you want to wrap it up with some closing thoughts?
Yeah.
Is there any other bits we want to cover, really?
Well, really, I mean, I think we talked about this already, but I think it's quite funny that the movie was a PG.
That's ridiculous. Didn't we say the same, though, about Jurassic Park?
We did, but I think this is much scarier than Jurassic Park. You know why? I think is because people didn't see Jurassic Park and then get scared of going,
to Hawaii.
Exactly. But people saw this film and got scared about going to Hawaii, or to Martha's Vineyard. But I think, I think it was tagged PG then was maybe too intense for younger children. I mean,
Okay.
Yes, I think it is. I think it's a bit intense. It's too intense for an adult.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And again, I think what makes it work so well is just the it's a PG-ish. By today's standards, this would be, I would have thought, of 15. But it's the suspense that comes with it, because I don't know whether we mentioned this already, but the shark only has 4 minutes of screen time, which when you think about
in total,
yeah, 4 minutes of screen time in total, which is incredible, really. I mean, that just goes to pays tribute to how well this movie is crafted, when you have suspense all the way through to the end, and the main villain, or the main plot point of the story, out of that 2 hours and 1 minute, is literally only in there for 4 minutes itself.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Incredible. I just one thing I wanted to say before I forget, that I saw an interview of Martin Scorsese, who was talking about Jaws, and he was talking about Spielberg, and he said that he remembers when Jaws came out in the cinema, he was with Steven Spielberg that night, and they drove down, I believe it was Hollywood Boulevard, but they drove down and they basically just went past cinema after cinema to look at the queues. And Scorsese said something along the lines of that, everything's changed for you now, because this was Spielberg's first, major, breakthrough film, wasn't it?
That's such a baller thing to go and do. Can you imagine that? Just me and you driving down past View Cinema, or the Odeon, and just seeing loads of people outside watching our movie. That's such a baller thing to go and do.
Driving. What we could do is just drive past loads of houses and look into people's windows, see if they're listening to our podcast, which they won't be, and we'll get restraining orders.
Yeah.
Joel, why are you naked?
Just going around with this in my hand as well, just covering myself up. But yeah, it's interesting because Scorsese was already an established director at that point as well, wasn't he? And 1975, I think, I could be wrong on this, I'm going to check now because I'm conscious of it. Taxi Driver came out that year, or was 1974? One of those. Taxi Driver. 1976, I was close. But again, he was already an established director as well. So, I mean, for him to see this as well, he clearly knew what was going on, just seeing these crowds of people as well. He knew that Spielberg has just made something completely different.
It would have been, yeah.
No, so go ahead.
Carry on.
No, it's all good, yeah.
I mean, it would have been a very, very exciting time. And also, like, the change of winds, where it's, like we said before, it's turning into kind of like the birth of the summer blockbuster.
Bonkers as well, because you think it's 1975. So it started something special then. I mean, Star Wars only came out 2 years after this. And that erupted even further again. I also like the little rivalry, or like the banter that they had, Spielberg and Lucas, with this as well, because they were always quite competitive in what they were doing. There was one point as well. Sorry, I wanted to mention this earlier on when we were talking about the malfunctions the shark had.
Yeah.
And Lucas was on set. He wanted a picture with his head inside the shark's mouth. And Lucas decided to have a prank on him and close the mouth as well. He pressed the button to close the mouth. Well, it backfired because Lucas got his head stuck inside the shark for 3 hours.
Oh, so Spielberg did the joke on Lucas to close
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he got stuck.
And for 3 hours. And it was said that in that time he wrote Phantom Menace as well.
That's where the birth of Jar Jar Binks came.
Exactly.
He was so pissed off in the teeth of a shark.
I hear you're laughing. You wait.
You wait. I'll have my payback.
You wait 22 years and you'll see. 24 years and you'll see.
Well, that's probably why he started with episode 4, because he had to go in with the good stuff to then lead it to the huge disappointment of a Phantom Menace. But yeah, anyway, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, but Jaws,
one we're looking forward to.
In a nutshell, great film.
Yeah, awesome film, fantastic suspense, and one of my favorite movies, something that I think will, I don't think we'll need to review any of the other movies because I don't think they live up to anywhere near the standard this brought in. But as far as blockbusters go, this still remains as one of my all-time favorites.
Lovely. All right. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Goodbye.